What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Inside the Burrow. My name is Jacob, joined by JJ, and Kevin is back on the podcast. Gentlemen, JJ, how we doing today?
Look, Jacob, at the beginning of the season, I said this FAU team is good enough to win the national championship, and they would win the national championship. And I was so high on them. And I'm back to that standard 7 in a row. This FAU team is winning the national championship again this year. This is the best team in the country, making back to the Final Four again this year. First ever national championship for an FAU basketball history. Probably in sports, FAU first national championship ever. And mark my words, clip it, do whatever you want with it. Right now, February 7th, well, FAU is 18-4, 8-1 in conference play. They are winning the national championship.
Somehow that's the least outlandish thing you've said in the last 5 minutes, but we'll go with it. Kevin, how are you doing, sir?
I don't know how I can top that up, and frankly, I don't even know if I should try. I did have the 1 week where I was hosting for you, Jacob, and
Appreciate that.
I think I almost derailed the show by giving Texas geography lessons, so we'll try and give less Texas geography lessons today.
Jeez, I must have missed that one.
Yeah,
how did that even come up?
We were talking. Well, it was the week that they were playing Rice and North Texas. And somehow I think I brought up that like Rice is west of North Texas, and started going on some random tangent about the geography of Texas because I thought that played well into everything. And I think I realized after the episode that no one cares about a Texas geography lesson on a Florida Atlantic based podcast, but who cares?
I mean, we have the age-old conversation of how on earth is it called University of South Florida in Tampa? That is just the most mind-boggling name of a college I think there is out there.
It's south enough when you consider the American
south
geography.
Compared to the rest of the United States, but it's not South Florida. We are South Florida, and there's more south of us. You can drive 3 hours south of us. All right, you can go down to Key West. That's about a 2.5-3 hour drive from here, and 3.5 hours north. Tampa, University of South Florida. Figure it out. I don't know. But today we have a few things to talk about. We have the recap of what we saw last week, which was just one game against Tulsa, which was a blowout for the Owls, 102-70. We'll talk about that as well as where kind of FAU stands in the landscape of college basketball currently. And then 2 games coming up this week, 2 rematches from games earlier on in the season with UAB and then Wichita State coming up later on this week before we record for you guys next time. So we will start, like I just mentioned, with that 102-70 win against Tulsa. JJ's favorite human being in the world, Janelle Davis, led the way with 24 points. He was FAU's most dominant player. He was FAU's best player, just as we have seen all season long. JJ, you got to actually speak with Coach about something that you've been talking on this show about a lot recently, is how you want him more involved in this offense, shooting the ball more often. How did that go, speaking with Coach?
Yes. So Jono Davis is someone who only shoots on 28% of possessions.
Only.
And that is not enough. So I went and prepared a question when Jono Davis had a master of a game, an insane game, just 26 minutes, 24 points. That is absolutely insane for Jono Davis. 26 minutes. He didn't play half of the second half. I mean, they took him out because the lead was so big, but that was just absolutely insane. With 5 rebounds and shooting 3 of 4 from 3 and 8 of 12 from the field. And that's just not enough for me personally, 28%. So I said to Coach, the offense seems to flow more when Jonell is ball dominant. So is getting him in isolation something you want to incorporate? And he said, it was a kind of mixed answer there. He kind of said yes, because towards the end, he said, we have to get Nelly more isolations, JJ. But he also said it's hard to incorporate it anymore when they're putting 2, 3, 4 guys even on him. And that's just absolutely insane. But Jono Davis is someone who I believe is the best player in college basketball. Someone who is just absolutely insane at the 3-point shot. And for me, when I evaluate players in terms of stats, I look at 50, 40, 90. Are they shooting 50% from the field, 40% from three, and 90% from the free throw line? When I'm evaluating great guards, like elite top 20. Jono Davis is shooting 51.2% from the field. So that 50% passes, which is number 100 in the country, exactly 151.2%. 49.5% from three, which he has improved so much since last year's 35.7%. He was a 27% three-point shooter in high school. So clearly he has absolutely worked on that at 49.5%. So that over 40% three-point percentage checks, and is shooting about 87% from the free throw line, which is absolutely insane. I said 90% is great. It's hard to get 90% because if you guys remember in the beginning of the season, he was shooting like 50% from the line. He has improved so much. Beginning of the year, Liberty, I think fourth, fifth game, maybe sixth, he had 1 point. 1 point. As well as 2 points in the second game versus Eastern Michigan. What Jonell is doing with shooting the three and getting to the hoop is insane. This is the AAC Player of the Year. He will be National Player of the Year and Wooden Award winner. And he is just so good. And the experience asking Coach May a question about it, I liked it, and I wanted to advocate for Jonell because clearly he's not getting enough touches, not enough possessions. Only 28% of possessions he's shooting. Elijah Martin is shooting more than Jonell Davis. No disrespect to Elijah Martin, but Jonell Davis should be shooting more than you. And, when you look at Evan Maya, which I think is probably the best, stats thing, Jonell is the highest plus minus in the American Conference at plus 15 per game. I think it's like 250 total. And then he's number 1 overall in offensive BPR, which is like just offensive stats. So he is cooking. So you got to let Chef Davis cook, and you will win basketball games.
If anybody ever wants to start the cult of Janelle Davis, I think you know who your PR guy is. I think he's right go ahead.
Yeah, can I just rebuttal that with he's getting the ball enough. I don't know what this idea is that he's not getting the ball.
You're not going to convince him. You're not going to convince him.
This is not an okay take. In my opinion,
JJ,
I mean, you should be.
JJ, he's getting the ball close to 30% of the time, right? And that includes shots, that includes assists, that includes everything, just putting the ball in his hands, right? Over the last 5 games, his usage rate is in the 96th percentile of players in the country, and they're winning because of it, right? I don't know why we would say he needs the ball more when they have put up some of the best offensive numbers in the country as of the last 8
games. This conversation is going to, I'm just going to stop you right there, JJ. This conversation we have pretty much every single podcast, whether it's with Kevin, whether it's with Richard, whether it's me, every episode we just run around in circles and never get anywhere. So I'd like to highlight some of the other players on the team. JJ.
Sorry to cut you off, Jacob. But first of all, sorry to cut you off, Jacob. You're not stopping me in this conversation, which I'm too passionate to talk about. He's shooting the ball on 28% of possessions. And he's the best player in college basketball. And he's shooting the ball 28% of the possessions. When his usage rate is under 20%, FAU has 3 of their 4 losses come when he's under 20%. Look at their wins.
And his usage rate isn't under 20%. So what's
when they lose games? So giving him a higher usage rate clearly means that they win games. Look at games they won. Arizona, number 4 team in the country at the point, 35 points. You look at other games. UAB last time, 30 points. You look at Tulsa, 24 points in 26 minutes. He had 36 before against UAB, 34 versus UTSA, where he did not get the ball close to enough. And guess what? He is a 50% free 3-point shooter. Let him take the ball. Let him shoot some step back threes. All his threes are catch and shoot threes. It's not okay. They just have to keep feeding him the ball. Teammates aren't feeding him the ball. Elijah Martin, Nick Boyd, you gotta feed Nelly more.
He has the ball 30% of the time.
28% of the time is he shooting shots. That is not close to enough. He's got to be over 50%, and that is
Over
minimum.
50%.
I've said it
50% for the
before.
for the
I
record.
said
50% has
80.
not been
Yeah,
done
I
in
said-
this century.
I said
All right, we
80.
need to wrap this up, JJ. We talked about Janelle Davis for 10 minutes already here.
Please, can we go to something
Kevin,
else?
Yes, Kevin. We saw all 5 of the starters get in double digits, with Janelle leading the way. That's probably the last time I'm going to say his name for like the next 10 minutes. Vlad with 18, Elijah with 16, Nick Boyd with 13, and then Brian Greenlee with 11. It was a very dominant performance on the offensive end. Something that JJ did mention. We got to get the starters out of the game really early there in the second quarter in a very dominant win against Tulane, and that has now bumped us up to kept us at number 20 in the standings. And then if you look at the bracketology, we are currently projected as the number 5 seed in the West bracket, playing North Carolina. So how comfortable do you feel now with FAU having won those 7 games in a row, going forward now, looking towards the end of the season, looking at the AAC championship, looking at the March Madness tournament? How confident do you feel about this FAU team going forward for the rest of the season?
I think if you had asked me 2 weeks ago, I did feel very confident, right? And like the perspective, or not even 2 weeks ago, I think more like a month ago. Like, I don't know if I would have felt confident. The perspective has changed given that they have found a way to get other guys involved. And the biggest problem for most of the season was that they had performances from John L. Davis. They had performances from Elijah Martin or Vlad Golden, but they didn't have guys like Greenlee or Boyd or even Weatherspoon like stepping up to somewhat of a consistent level. And like that's the biggest thing when you get to March is that like you can have the guys who score all you want, right? Like you can have a dude who puts up 30 points a game. You need a guy who's going to give you the clutch buckets when you need them. And I think that FAU has found those guys and not necessarily found those guys as in like they weren't going to do it, but these guys have found their consistency back from last season. And that's the biggest thing, right? Is that like we knew that John L. Davis, Elijah Martin, and Vlad Golden were going to be good basketball players. But could we get consistent performances from Nick Boyd, Greenlee, Weatherspoon, even like Gaffney, Trey Carroll? Like those guys, when they're playing well, this is a team that's unstoppable. That's one of the best teams in the country. And right now they're playing really well. And so I feel a lot more comfortable about where they sit right now, even if their seeding is sort of that middle like 5-6 seed. I still feel confident about them making a run because they have those players performing at a high level.
Go ahead, JJ.
So, first of all, the standard is not a 5 seed, and we should not feel comfortable as a 4, 5, 6, possibly 3. This FAU team should want a 1 or a 2 seed, and that should be the standard. Is at lowest a 3 seed. That's meeting my expectations. Probably a little bit below my expectations. I think we will get a 2 seed. Because if we win out, we go 20 in regular season play. If you include the tournament, you'd be 29-4. That'll put you at the 2 seed. Maybe, probably not a 1 because I don't think Purdue or UConn
A lot would have to happen for that to happen.
or Tennessee are going to lose many more games. So I think that being a 4, 5, 6 isn't. I would not feel confident if I was a 4, 5, 6 because if you're a 5 seed, that's a very possible upset against a team who won their conference most likely against a really good team that's in the G or in the mid-major basketball / high major basketball. Now, if you get a 2 seed, you play 15 seed, and then you get a 7 or a 10. That I feel confident. Now, second of all, in conference play, FAU has one competitor, and that is USF, with Charlotte going down to USF. Unless something, insane happens, FAU or USF will win this conference. And that game is coming up on February 15th in Tampa. I recommend It technically is a home game for FAU because USF, all FAU fans will be going out there, and the West Florida University doesn't really have you know much of a fan base really. West Florida, we can't call them South Florida, but you got to win that game, and if you win that game, you win the conference.
There's a very likelihood that that is the case, at the very least in the regular season. But first, before we do that, we have our rematches against UAB and Wichita State. UAB currently just above the middle range of, I guess you could say, of the conference, currently sitting at 5th in the conference at a 6-3 conference record, as well as being 14-8 in their season just in general. They're coming off of a loss against SMU before previously have beaten a team that's really slipped off in the second half of the season, Memphis, as well as North Texas. The last time these two teams played against each other was earlier back in the season, in which FAU saw a mostly comfortable victory at home against UAB Blazers, which was 86-73. The one thing I think we found with this UAB team is they don't have that go-to strong scorer that they can rely on when things are looking down, looking out. So Kevin, since we've already beaten this UAB team once at home and in somewhat convincing fashion in a 13-point victory, how confident do you feel going into this rematch, having to go up to Birmingham, where last time we played there last year was one of our few losses last year?
So I think that this is the game, if we're ranking the two upcoming games against UAB and Wichita State of confidence level, this is the game that I feel a little less confident about. Not to the sense that I think FAU is going to lose this game, but I think this is the game that if you are going to lose one of these next two games, and let's be clear, I don't think they lose one of these next two games, but if you were going to lose one of these next two games, this is the one you probably lose. This is a UAB team that has proven consistently that they're capable in one game stretches of beating teams, right? And they beat Memphis, who has fallen off a cliff and back and nosedived 3 different times. But I think this is a game FAU wins. I think it gets a little ugly in the middle part of the game because I think this is a UAB team that knows how to make things ugly. But I think FAU wins this game, so I don't really think there's a sense of confidence issues. But this is still a good UAB team, regardless of record. And it's a well coached UAB team, and I think that those sort of factors still play in my mind, even if I think FAU win this game at least fairly comfortably.
JJ, obviously with Janelle Davis, we've seen FAU lean towards him pretty heavily as the go-to guy, but with UAB, it's a lot more diverse scoring group. In any particular game, you could have any of these guys leading the team in scoring. When you have 5 of your players in double digits, led by Eric Gaines, he's more of a slashing guard, does not shoot well from beyond the 3-point line, but averages just over 12 points a game. You have Yaxel Lendenberg, who can do the dirty work down low as well as stretch the floor to the outside. So how do you think FAU's best attack is to combat how this UAB team can spread the ball around and find scoring from so many different options?
In terms of on UAB, I mean, I think that. Are you saying who can UAB find to find scoring options, or who should FAU look to score on UAB?
I'm saying, how do you think FAU will fare having to defend so many different guys when you're not particularly sure any given night who has the ability to take over?
Well, we saw this matchup two weeks ago, in where it was really a 16-point game. I know the score says 13. They hit a 3 with 0.1 seconds from almost half court. But really, I'm worried a lot about Eric Gaines if I'm FAU, and he's someone who will win Defensive Player of the Year in the AAC for sure, most likely. And I really don't think the stats really reflect who he is. I think he's a top 10 player in the American Conference, even with that shooting percentage from 3, which I know is down this year a lot. But he's a really solid player, especially at home. At home, he seems to play, a lot better than on the road. He's averaging over 13.5 points per game at home, which is more than his overall 12.2 points per game. And that game against Memphis, he absolutely popped off, shooting the ball 75% from 3. He was 3 of 4. And then He had 20 points, which is insane. So, really, I just think him. How will FAU fare against all these guys? I think they'll be fine. Like, I really, I know Yaxel Lundenberg is someone who stretches the floor, can get to the outside. He's an all right free 3 point shooter, but, I really am not looking out for him. If anyone, I think Eric Gaines can have a 30 plus point performance versus FAU, and I think you just got to stop him.
Kevin, we've seen this UAB team slow down their pace of play a little bit this year as they lost their dominant scorer from last year in Jordan Jelly Walker, who was scoring nearly 23 points per game for them. And you're left just with Eric Gaines and his 12 points per game as the leading for this year, compared to FAU's offense, where we know FAU loves to run in transition, get as many shots up as possible, and just have a large volume of opportunities to score. So who do you think comes out on top here in terms of the battle pace per play?
I mean, I think that FAU has proven that they can play slower, right? Like, I don't think that's a problem for them to play slower. They played slower against North Texas. They had no problems playing slower, right? Like, so I don't think it's necessarily a thing of like who wins this pace battle, because if UAB wants to dictate tempo and play this game slower, they can play this game slower. And frankly, I don't think FAU is going to be worried about it. They're one of those few teams that are like sort of in a way can play both ways, right? They can play faster, they can beat you by tempo, they can score 100 points and beat you that way, or equally, like, they can get nitty gritty, they can score 65 points and beat you in a game that's like quote unquote uglier. And like, I think UAB probably wins the pace battle just because that's something they probably are going to focus on a little bit more. And over the last 5 games, they're playing even slower than they have over the course of the entire season, But like, I think FAU's fine with that, right? Like, I don't think there's a sense of like panic or worry if they have to play this game slower and try and eke out an uglier win, because they feel comfortable being able to do so at a high level.
I like to just highlight one player that I've already mentioned once on UAB, and that is Yaxel Lindenberg. And I think that's somebody who's, I'd say, a little bit more concerning for me than Eric Gaines is as a guard. Yaxel, he can find his shot all over the floor. He likes to stretch the floor. He's not incredibly efficient at it, just shooting around 32% from 3, but he's 6'9", 230 pounds, has a good build for what he's asked to do in this offense. And he's asked to be a very versatile scorer. He can find work inside. He can finish at the rim. He can play in the post. He can play outside. He leads the team in rebounding at 9.5 rebounds, which would be the highest on FAU if he were on our side. So I think he's one guy that FAU really needs to focus on in keeping him as a minimal impact as possible. He did only have 8 points in the game where we played them earlier this season. So I'd like to see us continue that success in minimizing his work, as the rest of the players on this team, like, they're going to get their points, but you're not going to find one necessarily guy to take over like you would potentially if Yaxel finally starts to get his groove going for this UAB team. So we have one more team to talk about, one more preview to talk about. So with that, we'll wrap things up here with UAB with giving our score predictions like we usually do. And I will go to Kevin first on this one.
I have FAU winning. I think they win by like 12. I'll keep that short and simple.
Score?
Oh, I have to actually do the math here. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for that.
How dare us, right?
I know, right? I graduated school for a reason. 68,
no more
50, math. Give me 68, 56. Is that 12 points? That sounds like it's 12 points. So good enough for me.
Hey, multimedia majors can do something. All right.
I didn't even need the calculator, but it's right here if I need it next time.
Good job, sir. JJ, how are we doing? How's this game going to go?
So Kevin said earlier that this game concerns him a little more than Wichita State. And when he said a little more, I do not think that is enough. I think this game is the definition of a trap game. And I'd give UAB, I'd give Wichita State under a 2% chance, under a 1% chance, to win. I'd give UAB over 45% to win this game. I really think this is a coin flip. And I'm really having trouble here because FAU has never won a game at Bartow Arena in the history of their school, and I haven't picked FAU to lose yet. But I don't know. I
You
mean,
gonna do it?
you're on a really hot streak, and we saw this last year too. FAU was number 19 in the country, and now they're number 20, and they went into Bartow Arena, and UAB just absolutely smacked them. And I believe this was like February 8th as well, February 9th, sorry, and you're pretty much in the same position, one ranking spot away from what you were last year, and one day away from what you were last year. And I'm really nervous about Eric Gaines. I think he's someone who is going to go off in this game. However, John L. Davis is absolutely insane versus UAB, averaging 27.5 points versus UAB in the last 2 years, as well as 7 rebounds, and including 2 30-plus point games. So, I think if John O. Davis has a good game, you win. If he doesn't, you have a bad game. And that's pretty much what it is for FAU for every single game. I mean, if he touches the ball enough, they'll win this game because he's going to make his shots. So I like FAU in this one by 8. I'm going to say 84-76. And I like John O. Davis to go off for 30-plus again versus UAB.
When coming to the season, I expected FAU to finish around 5 to 7 losses on the season, and currently we're sitting at 4. So I do expect somewhere in the rest of the regular season for us to drop a game, kind of similar to what we saw last year with that Middle Tennessee game, where it was a lot of things went wrong for FAU, as well as being just stuck in the middle of a long season where you could easily find yourself dropping a game. And like JJ said, never had success going up to UAB, and last year was one of our few losses playing up there. Even though this is a very different UAB-looking squad, missing a 23-point per game score is something that you clearly can't just easily replace with how UAB's done this season at 14-8. Whereas last year, it was a very real possibility that they could have pretty easily won the conference going into the season. And then obviously with the success we had, that's a big part of why they didn't win the Conference USA last year. I didn't expect us to drop games like Bryant or FGCU along the way, but I do expect us to find another loss at some point in the season. I do not think it's going to be here. I think it might be that away game against Memphis when they finally start getting their momentum back. But I'm going to go with us escaping with a win, a little bit of an uglier game, a little bit more of a lower scoring game. I'm going to go with FAU 70 to UAB's 66. So a 2-point or 2-possession game rather for FAU. And then we have one more. You got something to say before we move on, JJ?
Yes. So I would give Wichita State a better chance to beat us than at Memphis or at home against Memphis. I think they are like one of the worst teams in this conference, probably bottom 5, bottom 3. So really just this game is 10 times harder than playing at Memphis.
That's why I think Memphis has just hit a really rough stretch right now. And
Memphis has
once they win a couple games in a row, they could very easily get their mojo back, especially when you have is he still the number 1 scorer in the conference?
David Jones, yeah.
David?
So David Jones is the number 1 scorer. I think 5th in the country at like 22 points per game. But Memphis has lost 4 of the last 5. Their best defender, Caleb Mills, is out for the season now. Javon Quinley has been on a big slump recently, and they're really just relying on one guy. So really, I just really am not confident in Memphis. I mean, you lost 4 of the last 5. You should have lost that last game against Wichita where you were down 11 with 4 minutes left, and then you came back. But I just get ready for the 25th against Memphis. Just get ready.
Yeah, we'll see that when it comes to it. But like I said, we have one more game to talk about before we end things out, and that is against that Wichita State team who has mightily struggled when it comes to conference time. They're 1-8 in conference, 9-13 on the season, so they had a relatively good record before coming into the AAC scheduling. And this is a team that really gave us a tough run the last time we played them, which was at home. Down here in Boca, we went into halftime losing 42-31 and did eventually come out on top 86-77. So, Kevin, with that game, what do you think went wrong in the first half, and then what can we take away from the second half that we can look to build on in this game over in Kansas this time?
I frankly don't think you can take much of that one game against Wichita State, right? Like I think that's a sort of a cop out answer, but I think that like for the most part these games are different, right? And this is a Wichita State team that's struggling to find anything that is considered basketball at this level. And so like I think if FAU just plays their game, they win this game, right? Like I think that this is the game where like if you don't shoot 10% from the floor in the first 5 minutes, like I know we talked about that before, like if they don't shoot 10% from the floor, I feel pretty confident about them winning this game by a larger number than like you would even expect, because like this isn't a very good Wichita State team, as you mentioned, and this is a Wichita State team that beat a couple of teams out of conference that are like bad, and so like they don't really have a lot of consistency going on, and this is a team that's been one of the worst in the American. So frankly, like I don't know if there's much you could take from that last game. Just like don't mess this up, and like maybe don't start the game shooting like 5% from the floor like they sort of have had a tendency to do in the past. But like other than that, I feel pretty confident about them winning this game.
This is a game that you saw FAU kind of go away from what they've been known to be, which was how they spread the ball around, how you can put anybody on the floor. Well, FAU only used 3 of their bench players, playing a total of 8 players the entire game against Wichita. And in a game where you're down against a lesser opponent, I guess it makes sense to want to play your guys who you can go out there, you trust them with the ball in their hands, rather than just try to get guys going, try to get guys in the rotation and just play them for the sake of playing them. So, JJ, do you feel that there's going to be a little bit more trust given to the rest of this roster, given that Wichita State has continued to struggle since that game? They've had a few close games, and most notably their last game against Memphis, quite a few games that have been within like 5, 6, 7 points of recent times. But do you think there can be more trust given to this FAU team going into this game against Wichita State compared to the last time where they had to dig out of a pretty large hole?
I, in terms of Wichita State, like they're a team that gets out to such quick starts, and you know they really get out to really fast starts, and then they struggle like mightily in the second half, consistently each in every single game. And I mean, like in terms of should there be trust in Wichita State? I mean, I guess you should not overlook this team. Um, but I really I don't know. Like if FAU plays with 100% effort, they should be winning the game at halftime. Even though Wichita State is a really good first half team, just some games we're sleeping on teams because we're 10 times better than them, like talent wise. So we overlook them, and it's their Super Bowl because FAU is top team in the conference, and that's what it was like for Wichita State. Now, I think FAU, you know, if they get out to a quick start, they should win this game.
Do you feel that we may have put that narrative a little bit to bed of how we were falling or just narrowly beating bad teams earlier on in the season, when we've seen double-digit wins against these 2 teams that were playing this week previously, UAB, Wichita State, beating Tulsa by 32 in our last outing? Do you think this team has stopped overlooking bad opponents per se?
Yeah, so the last game against Wichita, I think it was 9-point win, right?
Yeah, actually it was 9. You're right.
Yeah. But we outscored them by 20 points in the second half. Now, when it comes to the narrative of playing close against bad teams, I think FAU has fixed that because they just beat Tulsa by 32 points in a game where Tulsa isn't a bad team at all. Played a really close game against some really good AAC teams before. You know, they have probably the freshman of the year in PJ Haggerty, averaging 20 points a game. And in the first half, the defense versus him and Kobe Williams was really good. So I think that narrative is going to be put to bed of slow start of playing bad versus bad teams.
Just to highlight some of the Wichita State talent that they have, one of the guys that we talked about last time that FAU needed to stop was Colby Rogers, their leading scorer on the season, scoring 15.5 points per game, shooting well beyond the arc from 40%, and is a not quite as efficient version of Janelle Davis. He misses a lot more shots, and if he was more efficient, his numbers could be very much looking like where Janelle Davis is at this season. And he gave us a lot of fits last time. I mean, they're even a very similar build. Janelle Davis, 6'4", I think 205, 210 pounds. Colby Rogers, 6'4", 190 to 195 pounds. So the very similar athletes, as well as what they're able to do on the basketball court. And Kevin, we were not able to hold him much in check last time playing, giving up 18 points. Do you think that we have better chances this time around? And how important is that holding him to below his season average for FAU to get a win?
I don't know if that's as much like important as like people want to think it is, right? Like the rest of that Wichita State team just isn't very good. Like I can't really be nice about it, right? Like they're 1-8 in conference or something. Like there isn't much positive to be had from that. I am still a little bit concerned about the defense in general. I think over the last 5 games, they're still allowing about 75 points per game, and it works because they're outscoring teams by like 13 points, right? And they're scoring, I think, close to 90 points on average. But like, I still think there is some concern about the defense in general, and I'm sure that like Wichita State will find ways to exploit them for stretches. But I'm not really concerned about them holding Rogers in check, right? Like, I think I'm more so concerned about them not letting another guy go off, right? Like, if he goes off for 30 points, he goes off for 30 points. That's whatever, right? Like, but if he goes off for 30 points and you have another guy who gets 15 and another guy who gets like 10, that's a completely different story. I just don't know if Wichita State has a guy who can go for 15 consistently because, again, like this isn't a very good Wichita State team.
Sorry, been a pretty long episode right now, getting very close to the 40-minute mark. So we'll wrap things up here with our score predictions, just like we always do. This time we'll go to JJ first. JJ, how is this game going to go with this rematch against Wichita State?
So you're on the road in a hard environment in Kansas, Wichita, Kansas. That arena is pretty good. You know, probably gonna sell out the students. The students are gonna sell out for that game. If you play a good first half against them, you're gonna win this game. If you don't, you might not. As Jacob mentioned, at the very beginning of the season, I thought FAU would lose 0 games. I thought they would go undefeated this season, and as it turns out, that was wrong. Quickly after the Bryant loss, I said that they will have 2 total losses in non-conference and 2 more in conference play. So that would finish you the season at 4 losses. I said you'd have 2 losses in conference play. And when it comes to that, you have 1 more loss you can take in conference play for that to come true. And you don't have many games that I could see you lose older really than this one. Where at Memphis is hard. I will say it is hard. I will admit that, even though I don't like Memphis. And at USF will be hard. But this is a very potential game you could lose. However, I like FAU in this one by 18. I'll go. Actually, sorry, that's not what I have right now. I actually think that FAU beats Wichita State in this one by 38 points. Let's go 94 to 50 to 58. Wait, no, to 56.
I think this is going to be a blowout. I think FAU learned a lot in that first half against Wichita State, and it kind of slapped them silly a little bit. And since that first half, they've been on a tear, not really finding themselves down too often to lesser opponents, really outside of that UTSA game, which was just absurd, the amount of scoring that was going on, 112 to 103. very rarely are going to see a team that is normally bad score 103 points, even in an overtime. So I think we've seen FAU start to turn the corner a little bit on this season and feel a little bit more in charge and not playing down to opponents. And they're not going to take this Wichita State team lightly. And with that, I think it's going to be a pretty big margin. I think I'm going to go with 85 to 69. Was that 26-point margin for FAU? I think it's going to look pretty similar to Tulsa did, where you can get the starters out, get some of the walk-ons on the floor. Let us know down below your thoughts on the matter. How do you think?
No, I don't get to give one?
Did you not go?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
wow,
right,
Jacob. Wow.
I think I'm just so used to having JJ go second that I just completely forgot.
Wow.
It's funny, when I was giving my prediction, I was thinking like, wait, what did Kevin say? And if I just kept going. Kevin,
that's because I didn't say anything.
Yeah, that's it. Kevin, go ahead. My bad.
I was trying to figure out if I should just let you keep going and see if I could have carried this on to the end of the show, but I figured I should probably give a prediction regardless.
Yeah, my bad.
Again, I think FAU wins this game comfortably. I don't ever feel confident guessing a 20-point win because this is still college basketball, and if a team goes hot at one point in the game, it's closer than you would quote unquote expect. I think FAU still wins this game by high teens. I have it at 17 right now, and the official score prediction. And this time, I did have to bring out the calculator. I am not shamed. I am not shameless enough to admit that. I brought up the calculator because I didn't know what 83 minus 17 is. Turns out it's 66. Turns out it's 66. So 83 to 66 is my score prediction, brought to you by the Kevin Fielder's phone calculator.
Gotta love media majors, right? You guys just sit around in a room and talk for about an hour, and then you get your degree. So there you go.
Look. There's a reason I was a media major, and it's because I didn't know how to do math at eye level.
Well, shout out to business majors like me who had no idea what they wanted to do, so they went into business. And I do not want to go into the business world at all. Let us know your thoughts down below. Give us your score predictions. Just before we go, I thought this was very interesting. Just a little bit of breaking news. Nick Saban is joining ESPN. And I think that was kind of assumed that was going to happen, but now we have it official that Nick Saban is going to be an ESPN analyst, and I cannot wait for that. I would love to have Nick Saban come together with Bill Belichick and them do a podcast or something together just to hear them pick their minds. But I don't know. I just think that was really cool. And, breaking news as we're ending out the show. So I'm not really sure where this is going to go out. So it's definitely not going to be breaking news by the time that y'all hear it. But thank y'all very much for watching. Like I said, drop your thoughts down below. Give your score predictions down below, what you got going on for these two games. As well as please hit the subscribe button, hit that like button. And if you want more FAU content in written form, you go over to FAUOwlsNest.com where you can see some work from JJ. Kevin, have you done any written work on the site?
I have not, no.
Okay, so me and him have not. So, you only get to hear our beautiful takes over here, a little bit of exclusivity.
I would argue only getting me once a week is a good thing. So
I don't know. I think the people want more of this face. That's just me. That's just me. But thank y'all very much for watching. We'll see y'all next Wednesday. Have a great rest of your day. Take care, everybody. Go Owls.